Welcome back. We continue here. President Cyril Ramaphosa has hit back at Donald Trump's latest tirade after the US president vowed to exclude South Africa from the next G20 summit. Ramaphosa says Trump's decision is regrettable. The US president took to his Truth social media platform late yesterday and repeated baseless claims of a genocide against Afrikaners in South Africa. Trump boycotted the G20 summit over the same unfounded claims. Ramaphosa reaffirmed South Africa's right to participate in global forums and has rebuked repeated insults from the US government.
It is regrettable that despite the efforts and numerous attempts by President Ramaphosa and his administration to reset the diplomatic relationship with the United States, President Trump continues to apply punitive measures against South Africa based on misinformation and distortions about our country. The United States was expected to participate in all meetings of the G20 during South Africa's presidency and elected not to attend the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg out of its own volition. South Africa is a member of the G20 in its own name and right. Its G20 membership is at the behest of all other members. South Africa is also a sovereign, constitutional democratic country and does not appreciate insults from another country about its worth in participating in global platforms. South Africa will never insult another country or its standing in the community of nations.
Let's get reaction right now. We speak to international relations expert Ayesha Kajee, who joins us for some analysis. Ayesha, good to have you on the program. And also, given South Africa's full G20 membership now, how do you interpret the latest developments? We've heard from the presidency in that bite played a short while ago. But Trump's announcement that South Africa simply won't be invited, is this diplomatically feasible or purely political pressure from what you see?
Purely political pressure. Mr. Trump and his administration are behaving like a petulant child, quite frankly. They attempted to sideline South Africa, embarrass South Africa, firstly by electing, as the presidential spokesperson said, by choosing not to attend this G20 summit last week, and then added, shall we say, insult to injury by then insisting that a low-level designate of their foreign office would actually receive the baton from our presidency at the end of the G20 summit, which Mr. Ramaphosa quite rightfully said would not happen. So the US is actually petulant. It's frustrated that its attempts to sideline South Africa and to embarrass South Africa have thus far backfired and left Mr. Trump and his administration with egg on their face, frankly. And so this is now the latest in that series of attempts to belittle, sideline, and embarrass South Africa. South Africa is an independent member of the G20. It's a sovereign state. It does not depend on the United States for approval or for inclusion in the G20. And if the next G20 summit, scheduled to be held in Florida, in the United States, deliberately excludes South Africa, I can guarantee that there will be possibly some reaction from other G20 members, particularly those from the Global South, who may well decide then to boycott the G20 summit in the United States. And I wonder if Mr. Trump's administration has considered that possibility and how they will be seen in light of such a possible boycott by other G20 members, as I said, particularly those from the Global South. So I think what South Africa needs to do right now is to consolidate its relationships with other members, the other 18 members of the G20 or the G20 plus, consolidate its relationships with all of those members, including those from the Global North, capitalize on having hosted a very, very successful G20 summit last week, and basically seek to replace the trade losses that we've had as a result of Trump's policies or the Trump administration's policies since earlier this year, which are ongoing, we need to try and recoup those trade losses by really signing more bilateral and multilateral agreements with other G20 members, both within the African continent and within the global south, but with those other members of the global north who also have an appetite for South African resources, whether they are mineral resources or raw resources, as well as beneficiated ones, and really seek to improve our economic situation through those new alliances and new, hopefully new trade agreements.
Yeah. So South Africa called the US's move punitive when reacting to this and based on misinformation from what we're gathering. But could this set a dangerous precedent, Ayesha, if you will, for unilateral actions or even actions in multilateral forums here?
I think it could set a precedent, but I think that most rational, sane members of multilateral organizations such as the European Union, for example, or the African Union, and most members, individual state members of the G20 and beyond the G20, mostly have fairly rational administrations. Certainly they conduct their foreign policy, including their trade policy and aid policy, from a rational, sentient point of view. They don't base it, most of them, on misinformation and information that has been proven repeatedly to be false information. Mr. Trump and his administration appear to live in some kind of twilight zone where they prefer to believe misinformation that has been disproven repeatedly because it fits with their ideological agenda, and also because it allows them then to take punitive or pseudo-punitive measures against countries like South Africa because they don't agree with us on one or other issue. So they've really taken to heart this misinformed fake news of a white genocide happening here, which has been debunked so many times, it really does not bear debunking again. But it's also a reflection of the US's deep concern over South Africa's taking Israel to the International Court of Justice and then joining in the cases at the International Criminal Court as well. And because the US has been unable to persuade South Africa to drop those cases, particularly the one at the International Court of Justice, the genocide case, it is attempting to punish South Africa in a variety of ways, as I said, most of which have backfired on the US, and I think will continue to do so because most rational players don't base their foreign policy on myth and disinformation.
Yeah. Ayesha, how might other G20 members then react or respond to a global South country being barred effectively from a meeting that it is entitled to also attend? Could this maybe in fact trigger a broader legitimacy crisis for the G20?
I think it may trigger a broader legitimacy crisis beyond what already exists for the United States of America. Even if the United States is currently the world's superpower, it's not the only world power. And that was very clearly visible and on display last week at the G20. So I don't think it would be a legitimacy crisis for the G20, despite the US's chairing of the G20. If the US persists on this course, it may very well be the US that finds itself in a crisis of legitimacy. And that will not be an undeserved crisis. I think that, as I said earlier, we might well see other G20 members deciding not to attend the G20 summit next year in Florida, should the US persist with this line of action that they've announced. We can't we can't be certain, we can't guarantee that they will persist in it, because as we've seen from the Trump administration, there has been constant, shall we say, ideological shifting and policy shifting from this administration on a wide range of issues. So we may well see, as we also saw last week, we saw Mr. Trump entertain in the Oval Office at a press conference a mayor of New York whom he had designated with many sort of, pejorative names, and then come out and say, oh, no, I think this is a very rational person and we can work together, etc., etc. So it's not without precedent that Mr. Trump may actually backtrack on this. Yeah. And I certainly hope he will, and I'm sure other G20 members hope he will, because this is really going to end up not good for the United States. Certainly it will not be good for the G20 as well. And it certainly may result in a less than optimal attendance at the next G20 summit, should the United States persist in this agenda. Yeah.
Ayesha, as we wrap our conversation, does this dispute then also reflect a broader or larger geopolitical fight between the US and BRICS-aligned states, especially given South Africa's recent leadership role there?
Absolutely. I think that, while there are certain BRICS member states that do have close ties with the US and very warm ties with the US, their experience last week at the G20 summit, and Nhlanhla, I believe that experience was not only an experience of South Africa punching above its weight in diplomatic and international relations circles, but it was also an experience of the kind of character and culture South Africa, as in a multilateral forum and as the host of a multilateral forum, brings to that forum. That culture that we as South Africans are so rightly proud of, that culture of Ubuntu. It's been mentioned so often by so many of the delegates to the G20 that, everybody from taxi drivers to waitrons to real blue-collar workers have impressed the delegates at the summit to the extent that not only has South Africa hosted, a successful, diplomatically successful G20, but us as South African people, despite our internal issues and the divides we may have amongst us, we impressed those delegates as a people and as a culture, as South Africans. And I think that is what is going to endure in the minds of many of these delegates till the next summit at least. And if the next summit does not live up to the example set by South Africa in this one, that will be telling indeed, Nhlanhla.
Ayesha, thank you so much for that insightful discussion as well, giving us her perspective. Of course, as the US has decided, South Africa will not be allowed or will be barred from attending next year's G20 meeting.